So there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news, we're on our last speaker now. The good news, normally we save the best for last, but today we're making an exception. We'll let Eric go last. Oh, he already has a mic.
Yeah, I already have one. Yeah. Double fist the mics? Yeah. All right, so on December 4th, just this last year, at 12:30 in the morning, my neighbor pounded on my front door and woke me up. I walked 20 steps out into my driveway and I took that picture. A block and a half from my house, what would become the largest wildfire in California history was raging. And oh yeah, I had to convince my wife to let me put that picture up of her because she was 4 days from her due date when we had to evacuate. It was a crazy, crazy thing. Now, have you ever thought, like, if there was a fire coming or a big storm coming, what are those things that I would grab and throw in my car and take with? It turned out we didn't know at the time. We had 4 hours to pack our cars. We put all of our most valuable possessions in, our photos, all sorts of things. But, I'm an online entrepreneur, so I have priorities. The first thing I grabbed was my laptop and my hard drives. Then we got to the family pictures and my old scout uniform and all the other non-replaceable things. But first things first, business. But it was one of the things we had in our closet was our hospital bags for the baby coming because we were less than a week away. And it was a really good thing because that night at 8 p.m., my wife went into labor. So we were evacuated and up at my in-laws' house about a half hour away. And we called the doctor and said, our city's on fire. Should we drive the other way to Santa Barbara to the hospital? And he said, no, come to Ventura. So I drove down that highway, 101, with flames literally on both sides of my car. As my wife was in labor, she was videoing it because it was so crazy. So in the hospital, when we got there, the corridors were all filled with smoke. We had to wear these masks to keep the smoke from our lungs. Fortunately, the labor rooms were clear of smoke, but the hallways were pretty bad. But after everything, the next morning, my little baby Mila was born. She came out healthy and safe and sound. There's a picture of her about 4 hours old with her big sister and my wife. So it did come out okay, even though we were evacuated. But I'm not a typical person. I know we're probably not all typical people. We do things on the internet. We work online. So I did the logical thing any father would do with a less than a day old baby. I wrote a blog post in the hospital, and then I went on CNN. Yes, I'd been tweeting pictures and videos of the smoke and the fire, so I was reached out to by all these different media people, and I said, yeah, sure, I'll take my minute in the spotlight, even though I have a few-hour-old baby. I went on CBC in Canada twice, CNN International broadcasted around the world, HLN, and a nationwide interview on the radio for KISS FM. So that was a crazy time with my 18-hour-old baby at that point. But I did what any logical blogger would do when they said, can we use your videos and your photos on the internet? I said, of course, as long as you say on international TV, video by @EricProfits on Twitter, because you got to get the audience. So to recap, we had the baby, we were evacuated from the house. We couldn't go back home, though, when it was time to get discharged from the hospital because the fire was still going. So we drove and spent the next night at my in-laws, a half hour away. The next night we got to sleep in our own house, and the next night my in-laws got evacuated and had to come to my house. And I had to get these air filters so my little baby's lungs could breathe, and the closest place I could get them was 3 hours away in south central LA where training day took place. So I went to the hood to pick up some filters. So this is the aftermath. 6 homes were a complete loss within a block of mine. My next door neighbor had damage. It was very close to home. I took this picture the next day after the fire. It took about a month for the smoke to clear. These signs are still on my street saying, be cautioned because of the burned down homes. They're still, and the rubble's been cleared. They're finally rebuilding the first house, which is wonderful. But it was such a crazy experience to go through. Just the fire. But it was a happy ending. We took these pictures the week of July 4th. The little fire baby, Mila, is now 7 months old. Her big sister's 2.5 and is adjusting to having a little sister in the house. But I started thinking, what could I do with this experience? Of course, my first thought, I should start a podcast about what happens when you have a baby during a fire. You can drive 95 miles an hour on the highway because the police are busy doing other things. You can get on international media. There's so many things you could do. But in all seriousness, one of the best parts, or the silver lining of the fire, was all the support that we got from our community, from our synagogue, from our family and friends. 500 homes were lost in this fire. So those organizations, the Red Cross, all those, if you ever know of a natural disaster, really do help if you can. So anyway, about me, you can connect with me. I'm Eric Profits on Twitter, YouTube, /Eric Rosenberg, or personalprofitability.com. And that is the story of how I had a baby during California's biggest wildfire.